being Tyler's school counselor all through high school. And there's always a few kids that say they want to be a doctor, and some of them get off on another direction, but Tyler not only followed through, but he excelled, and we're so proud of him for that. But I just have one funny thing to say about Tyler. I just remember, so Tyler never needed a school locker when he was in high school. I don't think he even knew the combination, because his mother's room was his locker. And between every period, he would run in, drop some books down, pick up some more books, and run out. Am I right?
You're right.
He learned that from me.
I did it first.
So Joanne's room always had a lot of stuff in it, so, because everybody was comfortable there, actually. It was a welcoming environment. So anyway, we are so proud of Tyler, and you can read, there's quite a lengthy article in the program about all the wonderful things that he has done and all the people that have meant so much to him along his journey. And I just want to say, Tyler, we are very proud of you, and we would like you to come up and accept this plaque.
Thanks, Vanna.
Thank you, Mrs. Seavey. So I will say that it wasn't just my mom's classroom. I would say that half of the people at this table had my stuff in their classrooms as well. Most of it organized by Kirsten when it was organized. So hello everyone. Thank you for coming, not just for me, for the Alumni Association. I will say that it has been a long time since I've stood up in front of many of you, and I've been actually quite nervous today for many reasons. I don't make it back home very often, and that saddens me, but I'm very, very honored to be here today. So first and foremost, I would like to thank the Sebring-McKinley High School Alumni Association for naming me as the 2024 Distinguished Alumnus. I am truly honored and humbled to be standing in front of all of you today. As I start my round of gratitude, I do want to apologize in advance for anyone that I do forget to name specifically. That's been one of my biggest fears today, is that I would forget to name somebody. I do want you to know that I am thankful for everybody in this room. I'd like to start by thanking the selection committee, including Beth Seavey, Mary Jackson, Ray Porbaugh, Sari Seidel, Paula Waite, as well as the banquet committee of Trista Bates, Shelley Calderon, Lisa Dennis, Debbie Green, Jennifer Ripley, and my mother, Joanne Jones. Thank you to the many friends, former classmates, teachers, and family members who came from near and far to support me and the Alumni Association today. I'd also like to thank my partner, Chris, who couldn't make it today due to conflicting final schedule. And finally, thank you to my friend Tina, who traveled with me from Connecticut for the occasion, my aunts, Judy, Jan, Joyce, and their families who came today, our very good family friend Susie for nominating me for this award, my sister Brianna, and then my parents Todd and Joanne. I was asked by the committee to talk a bit about my career as well as some of my childhood and education while during my time in Sebring. I'll start chronologically, but may bounce around a little bit as I talk today. As many of you knew me as a child and during my time in Sebring, you may already know a lot of this information about me, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about it anyway. For those of you who knew my mother and or my aunts or uncle, you knew that they grew up on a house in West Georgia Avenue. And well, for the first year of my life, that was my house as well, until we moved to the house where my parents still reside today on Hillsdale Avenue. Hillsdale Drive, depending on if you put it into Google or not. Google doesn't recognize Drive. So I grew up Southsider through and through, riding the school bus to school, because you can't do that if you live on the north side of town. Going to the liquor store on South 15th Street that still stands, but that is closed to buy candy, because you could still do that back in the day. Playing baseball at Southside Park, and frequenting the Sebring pool, where I did grow up to be a lifeguard for 6 summers. And then as the bio in the program states, I basically grew up in the old high school because it was a place where my mother spent a lot of her time. It was one of my favorite buildings in the whole world, even to this day, even though most of it no longer stands. And I knew it like the back of my hand, mostly because I spent a lot of my time as a child terrorizing it and the people in it. Bree and I probably have more photos on that homecoming backdrop set up in the old room 11 than most of the students who went to school in that era do. And I really wish that I had a slide projector today so that I could show you those photos, mostly to show you how cute I was and how many stupid haircuts my mom gave my sister back in the 90s. The bowl cuts especially. I do have a few of them on my phone if anyone would like to see them after the talk. I went to B.L. Miller for elementary school, where I was in Mary Bertolini's first grade class. She is here today. And yes, it is very weird to call her Mary and not Mrs. Bertolini, even 28 years later. I was in the last class to attend FA for middle school, and the first class to attend BL as middle school in the new portion of BL. I then went on to junior high in the high school, in what remains of the old high school, and it was very odd for me to attend classes with Debbie and Kathy, where in the same halls where I used to roll my mom's purple desk chair up and down the halls until Senor Thago would come out in the hall and yell at me. In the fall of 2004, I entered high school, and I was kind of a kid in a candy shop. I'd always been very inquisitive, and for the first time in my schooling, I could truly quench my curiosity and inquisitiveness by choosing electives with Mrs. Seavey and taking more specific courses than just those big 4 subjects that we always had to choose between. And I could really get involved in a plethora of extracurricular activities. I didn't choose a study hall my first year. And I had to find other times to do things like work on the yearbook and other activities. But I did spend the next 4 years determined to be the best that I could at everything that I did, in constant but friendly competition with a few of my classmates, Kirsten in particular. And all the while, I was also frequenting the backs of many of my teachers' classrooms, Herman Holbeck in particular. I think I sat at Holbeck's desk as much or more than she did, working on the yearbook and prom. When I wasn't there, I was in the psych classroom trying to be better than she was at backgammon. I never succeeded at that, but I did succeed at being better than Bree, to the point where she did once strike me with psych backgammon board. And then I also followed in Tristan and Sam's footsteps, taking over the editorship of The Echo about halfway through my high school tenure. Before I get too much further off track, what does any of this have to do with my career now and where it led me to where I am? Well, as a true kid in a candy shop, as I got to the end of my high school tenure, I had no idea what I wanted to study in college or even where I wanted to go. I was interested in going to Duke or Yale or even OU in case I wanted to keep doing the journalism thing, but honestly, my biggest issue was that I really did like everything. My senior year, I began taking anatomy and physiology, and I absolutely loved it. And I began to think, hey, can I make a career out of this? That is when I found out about the BSMD program through Northeastern Ohio University's College of Medicine, or what was UCOM at the time, now NeoMed. For those of you who are not familiar, this is a public medical school shared by Kent State, Youngstown State, and the University of Akron, also now Cleveland State and Hiram, through which students can be accepted for both an accelerated bachelor's program at one of these affiliated universities and then matriculate onto medical school at NeoMed as long as they've met the undergrad requirements. While I wasn't quite sure if anatomy and medicine were just my flavor of the week, I decided to just go full steam ahead, knowing that I could change later if I wanted to, got accepted to the Kent State program, and began this program 1 week after graduating from Sebring. I won't really belabor college and medical school experiences, but those were completed in a combined 6-year process. I graduated from medical school at the age of 23, and during my first semester of my medical school portion, the 3rd year into this 6-year process, I did my gross anatomy course with cadavers, and that's when I had my aha moment that I wanted to pursue a career in surgery. After medical school, I moved to Cincinnati to complete my 5-year residency in general surgery. To say that that was the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life would be an understatement. During medical school, there are times when you study for 12 or 14 hours a day for a single exam. It's more than a full-time job. And residency put that completely to shame. I was averaging 80 hours of work per week, caring for patients, performing surgeries, taking 28-hour call shifts regularly, but still expected to read, learn, do research, etc., all on top of this, meanwhile managing my regular life outside of this. Would I do it again? Absolutely. But asking myself that question and thinking about the sacrifices made during those 5 years, a significant portion of my 20s, makes me realize how much I really had to love what I did and what I do to be willing to go through it again. My experience in residency took me to the home stretch, a coveted surgical critical care and trauma fellowship at Yale University School of Medicine. When I was younger, I had secretly thought about applying to an Ivy League school, such as Yale, but I never had. When the time came to actually apply to colleges, I got accepted early decision to the BSMB program in fall of my senior year, so the decision seemed to be made. Now I got the opportunity to finish the final year of my medical training, 12 years after leaving the halls of Sebring-McKinley High, at one of the top universities and hospitals in the country. Honestly, for the first few months that I was at Yale, it honestly felt surreal. About halfway through my fellowship, I got another surreal opportunity, the chance to interview for a faculty job to stay at Yale upon finishing my fellowship. After many rounds of interviews in a few months, I got the job, and it is the position where I remain today. So what is it that I do exactly now? My role can be a little bit confusing, as my official title is Assistant Professor of Surgery in the Division of General Surgery, Trauma, and Surgical Critical Care. That means that I spend my day-to-day as a clinical surgeon, either doing emergency general surgery, so think appendix, gallbladder, bowel, etc., providing care for and or performing surgeries on trauma patients. So most people think like a trauma, you break a bone. I care for those patients. I don't do surgeries on those patients, but a very common misconception. Or rounding on patients in the surgical ICU. So I like to think that I have 3 specialties, and I kind of do these interchangeably throughout my day. Where does the part professor come in? So this sounds like a doctor that you can find in any hospital across the country. Well, along with this, I have fellows, residents, medical students with me as they're attending at pretty much all times throughout my day or night in the clinical setting or at various levels in their training. While the majority of my time teaching is in the clinical setting is spent in the clinical setting, and very little is spent in a traditional lecture hall, I do spend some portion teaching lectures to the residency and fellowship programs, directing the students on their clinical rotations and electives, and engaging in things like research among other various university and hospital committees. I recognize that the primary prompt of this talk was supposed to be a talk about my career with some background on my childhood and education in Sebring. And as Bree says, I could talk about surgery or medicine and forever. Normally she is correct. I could talk your ear off about it for the entire day. But if you think about it, I graduated from Sebring 16 years ago, and it took me 12 years to get to the point where I was in my attending or faculty position. So my career has been relatively short thus far. And short of telling my trauma war stories, which I'd be happy to talk about when I'm not up on a podium in front of a large group of people, the majority of what I have to talk about is the lead up to this in terms of what I do in my professional life. What I do want to talk about a little bit more is a little bit more personal, and it's something called imposter syndrome. For those of you who are not familiar, this is a phenomenon in which someone doubts their own skills, intellect, and or qualifications. Almost all physicians, and it's not unique to physicians, but in my experience, this is something that almost all physicians have experienced at some points in their career. I know that I and the majority of my close friends and colleagues absolutely have experienced this. The very first time that I was the attending surgeon on call when a gunshot victim rolled into the trauma bay, and I looked around to see where my attending surgeon was, I definitely felt this. I looked around only to remember that it was me, and no one above me was coming. And I was the one responsible. I was terrified. Not just because this is a stressful situation and someone's life is literally hanging in the lurch. I had spent years of my life training for this exact moment, learning how to stay calm in this exact situation, and having brought patients back from much worse situations many, many times before. But rather because imposter syndrome creeps in at the most inopportune times, even just temporarily, and makes you doubt your own skill set and credentials. However, each time the situation arises, because it really does never truly go away in your career, you need to snap out of it, reassure yourself that you are well trained to do what you have to do, and do everything you can to save the life in front of you, because more often than not, you can. Believe it or not, Sebring High School prepared me for experiences like this long before I knew exactly what I would be doing in my life. And it all comes back to one common theme. No one ever told me that I couldn't achieve something here, period. Coming from a small town in a small school, there are people on the outside who are bound to doubt you, and bound to say that you can't succeed in a career like trauma surgery or at a place like Yale. But the people here never once told me that I couldn't do something. Debbie Garrity was constantly telling me carpe diem, seize the day. Debbie Wybush recognized that I had become less adept at mental math as a senior than when I had first entered her class in 8th grade. Yes, I took her class for 5 straight years, and she basically became my second mother during that time. So she took my calculator from me during her senior calculus class and made me do the math in my head because she didn't want me to lose those skills. When I told Herm that I was interested in maybe attending Duke at the end of my junior year, one of the most exclusive universities in the country, more exclusive than over half of the Ivy League schools, she didn't doubt me. The first thing she asked me was to get her one of those secret cheer sheets that they hand out in the student section at their basketball games and give her one. Because she had no doubt that I would get into Duke if I applied and that I could get her one of those cheer sheets. Each time I told Holback about a new adventure, she was more excited because this meant she would get a new pennant on the wall of her classroom. To this day, even if it's been months and months since I catch up with Seg, we get to nerd out over science, backgammon, or both. And so these people still remain supportive people in my life. My sisters always offered up a fierce competition, both in and out of school. And finally, both of my parents have always offered their unwavering support and advice every step of the way. Even when I lash out when I'm exhausted and frustrated, even as recently as this past Monday, when I'd spent 5 hours unexpectedly reconstructing an abdominal wall way after my day was supposed to be done and I wasn't on call. And then I came out of the operating room to 42 text messages, some of which were from my mother, badgering me about cake frosting flavors. And whether or not I was going to have time to get the haircut that I had scheduled for the next day. When I unexpectedly had to work the next day, my first day off in almost 4 weeks, and I had to cover for a partner who came down with influenza, and I didn't know if I was going to get that haircut. And I said, I don't have time to talk twice, and she continued to text me. And I called her, and before I could say a word, she said, I thought you didn't have time to talk today. And I stepped into an empty operating room to yell at her. And I immediately apologized. So, they continue to support me and take that from me when I'm having the worst days. The point is, Sebring has incredible people without whom I would not be who or where I am. When I first was notified that I received this award, I was obviously so incredibly honored, grateful, and humbled to have been chosen. But also my imposter syndrome crept back in, and I began to think, what have I done to truly deserve this? As I said earlier, I am not terribly far into my career due to the fact that it took me 12 years after graduation before I could even begin my faculty position. While I do feel great passion and pride in the work that I do, I feel that I still have so much more to accomplish as both a surgeon and an educator. The next thing that I wanted to do was see the list of prior Distinguished Alumni Award winners. I'm not sure if I thought that this would help my feelings of being a potential imposter or not. Spoiler alert, it did not. But I at least wanted to see who came before me. I originally made a list of all the names that stood out to me, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to read it to you because it was quite extensive. Rather, I will mention a select few who are in this room and who have made a significant impact on my life. Kathy Myers, Debbie Wybush, my aunt Joanne Fiergate, and obviously my mother Joanne Jones. Just thinking of the number of lives that these 4 women have touched in this town, not to mention other places, it's no wonder that I may feel that I'm not on the same level as they are and so many other on that list. Speaking specifically of my mother, prior to being named this year's Distinguished Alumnus and seeing this list, I actually had no idea that she herself had won this award in the past. She won it back in 2003. At that time, I was 13 and probably off in my own selfish teenage world. My entire life and years before that, she had spent countless hours dedicating herself to the students of the school and people of this town. She is the epitome of selfless. As I've been racking my brain for weeks, thinking about what I can do to give back, I thought about her literal lifelong dedication to Sebring McKinley High School, and I had an idea. As I live on the East Coast and I don't make it home often, I don't get the opportunity to give back to our community in the same way as people like my mother do. However, as a very small gesture of my gratitude for all that Sebring has given me over the years, I'm using this forum to officially announce a new annual scholarship in the amount of $1,000 to be given to a graduating senior who has dedicated a significant amount of service to the school throughout their time at Sebring McKinley High School. The scholarship will be named the Joanne Jones Honorary Scholarship for Service to the School. The recipient recipient will be selected by a committee of faculty who has previously taught with my mother, including Nicole Mathias, Carolyn Holback, Mary Jackson, and Lisa Lynn Secretario. Thank you all again for this high honor and for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I am so incredibly proud to be an alumnus of Sebring McKinley High School, and I hope that I can continue to make you all proud as well. Thank you.